Hello everyone, and welcome to our final webinar for National Archaeology Week, which celebrates the archaeology and cultural heritage of Australia and the fantastic work and diverse work that Australian archaeologists do on anything from the deep past to the present. I'm Caroline Spry. I'm the co-chair of National Archaeology Week, and I wear a few different hats, but primarily I work as an archaeologist and heritage advisor with the Wiradjuri people, on whose country I'm joining you from today in Melbourne, Australia. And I'm also an adjunct senior research fellow in the Department of Archaeology and History at La Trobe University. I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of Australia and their ancestors and elders and community. Today, I'm honoured to introduce our panellists for our webinar, Braiding Indigenous Knowledges and Science, which will be discussing the newly established National Science Foundation funded Centre for Braiding Indigenous Knowledges and Science. So we have joining us today, Kellie Pollard, a Wiradjuri archaeologist and ARC research fellow from Charles Darwin University in Darwin, Australia. And Claire Smith, Professor of Archaeology at Flinders University, an elected fellow of the Australian Academy of Humanities, and past president of the World Archaeological Congress. So Kellie's joining us from Darwin, Claire's joining us from Adelaide, and Claire is also with Elspeth Hodgkins, a PhD candidate at Flinders University, Darren Sievers, who's a Dallabon man and a PhD candidate at Flinders University, and Maria Ortiz, who's a PhD candidate at Charles Darwin University. And we're hoping to also be joined by Aura Marek Martinez from America, who's a Dineg Nimipu Hopi woman and Associate Vice President at the Office of Native American Initiatives and Assistant Professor in the Anthropology Department at Northern Arizona University and Co-Principal Investigator of the Centre for Braiding Indigenous Knowledges and Science. So I'll now ask all the panellists to turn on their audio and video, and I'm going to pass over to Claire Smith to get us started with our discussion today.
Hi from us here in Adelaide, and I'm going to pass over immediately to Kellie Pollard to do the acknowledgement of country.
Good morning, everyone. And I'd like to say I would love to pay my respects to all of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who will be joining us in this webinar today. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present and future of the Larrakia people on whose country I am presenting today. And I would like Claire to do the acknowledgement for her part of Australia. But welcome to all of the people who have joined us in the webinar this morning.
We're here on Kaurna land, and I'd like to acknowledge obviously Kaurna people, but also the Aboriginal people with whom we work, from the littlest community like Werribee, which has about 50 people, to the biggest community of Indigenous people in Australia and also obviously overseas. Yep. Should we go to the next slide? Okay, we're going to talk a little bit, first of all, for this talk, we're going to talk about what is braiding knowledge for people who it may be a new idea, although it's been around for quite a while. And then we'll talk a little bit about the centre, the new centre in the US. And we've just come back from a workshop there, or a gathering. And then we'll talk a little bit about one project that we've got here, Wiradjuri, then we'll end up back at the centre. Kolchok, do you want to talk a little bit about what's braiding knowledge to you?
Okay, so braiding knowledge to me, it's not about taking one knowledge and changing it. I think knowledge in one sense is its individual strand in itself. And braiding knowledge is about grabbing other pieces of strands, and it's weaving them together. And you're not losing the knowledge, you're not changing the knowledge, you're just adding to it with other strands. And those strands are woven together, and it makes a far more stronger piece. Also, for me, braiding knowledge is when you see one strand of information and you then put another one next to it, it becomes more seen as well. So you put a lot of strands together and you weave them together, then it becomes not only a strong strand and a woven strand, but it's seen and it's there. So yeah, for me, braiding knowledge is more than just about, it's not really changing it, because we all have our individual knowledges, and I think it's important to acknowledge that they are all valid.
But when you do put a braid together, if you think you've got like a pink and a purple and a blue and a yellow, you put them all together, they're individual braids, but you turn them into something that is actually stronger. And the creation of the braid is the thing that's new. Kel, what about you?
I think for me, braiding knowledge is about, it's a theory of how to recognize and give appropriate acknowledgement to Indigenous, the veracity really of Indigenous ways of knowing and making knowledge, which is scientific in its own right. And I think braiding knowledge is both a theory at meta level, which is the kind of area that Sonia Adelaide's involved in at the minute with the civics research in the US, but braiding knowledge is at theoretical level is also a place-based community process. And I think that it's also, so it's theory, it's a methodology, and it's a set of community practices. And I think it incorporates what we can say at meta level around the world among Indigenous groups have what sort of values they have in common and what kinds of philosophies and worldviews Indigenous people have in common that bring all of those ways of knowing into the braiding process. And then within our respective countries around the world, Indigenous people have, their local, place-based, community-based systems of braiding knowledges. And, I like to say that in Australia, we also use the phraseology weaving knowledges. And of course, then when we take into account local terminologies, whether it be Aboriginal English or, Creole or someone's like Ngomata, Northeast Arnhem Land, people are always going to conceptualize what braiding knowledge is for them at a place-based level.
That's good. Maria, what do you think? What was it? We've just come back for people we've just been at a 3-day workshop at the University of Massachusetts which was the first workshop of pulling it all together. So we all learned a lot there. So Maria, what is it to you?
Well, I think for me, as an archaeologist, it's just when you're going out on country, instead of seeing things from your perspective, trying to intertwine that traditional knowledge and seeing, Aboriginal people have been here for 60, 50,000 years. So they know country better than anybody. So it's just about intertwining archaeology and knowledge and Aboriginal knowledge together.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah, I think as Maria and Darren and Kellie were saying, braiding knowledge within archaeology specifically, hi Aura, is also about how we do archaeology. So it's about moving away from this very colonial research method of doing archaeology on and for Indigenous communities and going to a by and with methodology. And starting to think, how do we braid knowledge through all steps of the research process? And what does that look like? And I think that's a big question that the Centre for Braiding Indigenous Knowledge and Science and here the Australian Hub and Aura, we're all looking to answer this and say, how can we move forward and have better practice as archaeologists? Yeah.
And for me, the other thing about, I guess if you think about the braids and the strands and of knowledge is that I feel that with Indigenous cultures, we are spiritual cultures, and it really is a part of our thinking. And I kind of see that that spiritual sort of quality to it is like the bond of the strand, and it holds the strand together. And I think that it's like you can have strands and braids that are not necessarily strong, but the spirituality element to our cultures really makes it a stronger braid and is quite integral to our knowledges.
Aura, since you're here, what's braiding knowledge to you?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for those of us on this side of the hemisphere here, Northern Hemisphere. Well, I think for me, a part of braiding knowledge is really braiding the knowledge and the teachings that have been passed down from, my parents, my grandparents, from one generation to the next, as far as what it's like to be from a place, right? To come from a certain part of the world and have a relationship with that piece of land, with the landscape, and understanding that it's not just an inanimate sort of object, but there are deities, right? There's personhood that's a part of that landscape. And so understanding how to live and what that relationship looks like and how to honor those relationships, right? The spirituality aspect, pulling all of those kinds of knowledges that's appropriate, right? Pulling that knowledge into some of the what we would call Western knowledge, right? Western scientific knowledge that has really been at the expense used against Indigenous people. So pulling some of the methodologies of some of these particular disciplines, such as archaeology, geosciences, hydrology, right? Some of these methodologies, and braiding that knowledge so that it not only benefits Indigenous communities, but it means something to them, right? It's also a way of thinking about future generations. And so upholding your sacred responsibility to teach. And so braiding knowledge not only encompasses these methodological pieces, but it is very much a way of training, right? And so thinking about how do we sustain these kinds of methods, and making sure that folks, our youth, right, our students, our community members are a part of this process as well. So I think that's a large part of what I think of when braiding knowledge is when I'm asked about braiding knowledges.
And this is just a slide so people can think about, the different kinds of knowledge and how one might balance the other, or, give different insights. So this is from the Alaska Native Science Commission. And one of the big things for CEBICS, of course, is education, science education. And that's been happening in North America. There's been a big movement there for quite a while, really. Or if you think of Robin Kimmerer, it's been a long while, a long while coming, really, hasn't it?
I definitely, and I think it's been this is something that we've had to do since colonization, right? As Indigenous peoples, it's a way that we've been able to survive. And, we've always had to braid our knowledge in order to make sure that we have future generations, right, that are coming behind us, and making sure that they have a place. And so, I think within academia, right, within thinking about that space in particular, it has been something that we've seen, within the past maybe 20 years or so. And, we've all, I think, as Indigenous scholars, have been fighting for this kind of methodology and really valuing Indigenous knowledge, right? And what it means to us, and just acknowledging the fact that, we've been here, right? Somebody mentioned 60,000 years, and that's something that science has been able to finally catch up with, and understands that deep time connection, I think, and coming to it. And so I it's about time, right? And seeing the Center for Braiding Indigenous Knowledge and Science, it's something that we have, I think a lot of us as Indigenous scholars have been doing for a really long time in our own career, and understanding that, we have an obligation, this kind of sacred responsibility, right, to do this work, and really push to have our values and our, you know, our knowledge systems a part of academia and being accepted, right? On those same kinds of lines as far as evidence, right? So, yeah.
Or you said something before about relationality. And Kellie, I've been trying to write about this, I don't know, last week anyway. And you talk about relationality a bit. Do you mind just talking about what that means in your mind?
Which one of us?
So,
Or both, but maybe Kellie first, because I know Kellie's been thinking about it a lot, and I'm trying to think about it.
Well, relationality for me is about building, you know, a really humane and caring and respectful relationship with the people that we work with in our communities. And so I feel like relationality and relationship is inextricably connected. I don't feel like you can sort of like isolate one from the other. And when I talk about relationality and relationship, what I mean is taking the relationship and, well, thinking about what it entails first off, you know, how deep do people feel comfortable with in developing deep and meaningful relationships with Indigenous people who we work with. It's like something that was expressed on that former slide. The prospect of working with Indigenous people and, you know, entering into a relationship where you honor and respect their ways of knowing, being, and doing in the form of relationality in your relationship with them is not something that will appeal to all archaeologists and students of archaeology who want to work with Indigenous people, because it may involve, and frequently does involve, making you know, not just sharing your own values, but it also frequently involves, for me, being honest about each other's vulnerability, being honest about, you know, what it takes to really make the relationship work, you know, modifying, talking about people's expectations and the kinds of personal and professional sacrifices that will be made to develop a really genuine, authentic, honest, respectful relationship through relationality with people. And I think that's something that isn't taught enough at university to undergrads. And it's something that a lot of undergrads will only sort of come to learn about when they attach themselves to researchers or consultants who are working with people in communities. So I think for me, relationality is about deep, meaningful relationships that honor, respect, and privilege the worldviews, the ways of knowing, being, and doing with the people that we work with in our communities.
So, so I'll get this aura, I think, in this case. So that's, I mean, that's a really good expression of relationality in terms of people. But if you're thinking, I've got this slide here by Robin Kimmerer, and Aura, you were talking about relationality in terms of the earth and ancestors. And that came up quite a bit in the workshop. Do you mind just expressing a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Claire. I think, you know, in the ways that I was taught, so just as a matter of protocol, I apologize that I was late, right? And so in honoring, you know, who we are and our relationships with one another, right? I really appreciate, Kellie, your description of relationality. There's not a lot of, you know, succinct descriptions of what it entails, and you provided a very amazing descriptive explanation of what relationality entails. And again, you know, this isn't something that's taught enough in the academy. And so I think for me, right, in thinking about this relationship with the earth and who we are, like I said, our languages, our identities, and this is the way that I was taught as a Navajo woman, Nez Perce woman, is that everything that we're taught within our homelands is who we are, right? That's our culture, that's who we are, that's where we come from. And so in thinking about that and just honoring as well, just like to introduce myself very quickly. So DAATSIA or American Martinez Yanisha. dik anenishle do ni mi pui paktise bashishchin. Do kis ani dashiche do belakane dashnale. Akut ego esanenishle. Lapwe Idaho din yisi na shak do kiltanete na shako. So I just introduced my family line, where I come from. And so I'm a citizen of the Navajo Nation in the four corners of the United States. So Arizona, Utah, not quite, we don't have our reservation lands in Colorado, but we have in New Mexico. And so our lands are 17 million acres of land here in that area. And so within that, the homelands of what we call Dinipikea, we have a relationship with our landscape. And so we recognize that we have 6 sacred mountains, but really four that align with our directions, so north, south, east, and west. But those relationships, that are the ceremonial practices that we maintain to honor the relationship that we have, to honor the land and everything that it provides for us, is part of relationality as well. So we honor through our song and our prayer and our ceremony this landscape and all that it is, right? And all that is a part of our lives and how we sustain and nourish ourselves. And so I think that's another part of thinking about relationality, is that responsibility that we have to, steward our homelands and make sure that we are leaving things better for the coming generations than what we've inherited. And I think those, braiding that kind of knowledge and those understandings, right, this way of being and knowing into scientific methodology or Western science methodology, provides a stronger way to address some of the problems that we're trying to address through CBIC, so climate change, the destruction of our sacred places and our cultural places, and trying to protect our knowledge, our food systems. And so all of those are connected, right? Interconnected. And I think that's a part of braiding or weaving. And I really appreciate, Kellie, your words about locally specific knowledge and the way that looks in people's communities and homelands. Because I know it looks different here. I know it looks different here than, the way it looks in your communities, in your homelands. And so just understanding that it looks different for each place that these interactions are happening, right?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, really. I mean, it's the beauty of it for science as well, which is all that potential out there in the world of working with Indigenous peoples in local communities to, take much better care of the planet, but for everyone, but much better care of our traditional countries and where we come from, with working with local scientists in the areas where we come from. And it's just all that amazing potential there that is yet to be realized.
Right. I think that's the beauty of this, right? Is the space that's available for, Indigenous understandings and knowledge to really assist and I think provide some entry points that haven't been maybe discovered or understood within academia, that our communities and our people, different people, have knowledge of. And it's really exciting to think about the possibilities of what that looks like to moving forward with all of these opportunities to braid and understand what it looks like to integrate and weave together these areas. So yeah. Oh, there you go. Six.
I thought maybe now we might talk a little bit about the new Centre for Braiding Indigenous Knowledges and Science, and Aura, you're one of the leaders of that. So I've just got like 5 or 6 slides on different aspects of that. Aura, do you want to talk about the background and how it came about?
Yeah, so Sonia Atalay is our director, right? Our fearless leader, if you will. And so this was something that she had been really working on for, a really long time. I would say at least 20 years. And it really started as an idea and just the challenges that she faced in her career as an archaeologist, and really trying to integrate and braid Indigenous knowledge into the issues that she was finding with the Native American Graves Repatriation and Protection Act, right? Or Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, NAGPRA. But also in thinking about, how do we apply Indigenous knowledge outside of Indigenous communities, right? And pulling together some of the commonalities of what and how we can do better as scientists and how we can do better as archaeologists to communicate and not communicate, but to benefit Indigenous communities who are part of the work that we're doing. And so Sonia contacted folks that she had relationships with throughout all of her work, through just the time that she'd been in academia, but through her own personal relationships in community, and asked folks about the issues they were facing, right? So very community-based approach in thinking about what are the issues that they're facing and what are they worried about for the future. And, in thinking about it, it came from a very personal space, and being one of the few Indigenous peoples who are, doctoral professors, right, on that level. And I don't know if that's translating very well, but who have PhDs, right, and are considered professors or lecturers in their fields, and then having to do a lot of the work of retraining colleagues and students to understand the opportunities that are available when working with communities, but understanding as well that your research should benefit Indigenous communities. And so again, right, all of these issues came to the forefront, and what we realized was that everything, right, when we had these conversations, we realized that our understanding of what was at stake and what we were worried about really was interconnected in these areas. And there were so many sort of intersections that we decided to go a little bit more general and thinking about the issues of climate change, right? The destruction of our sacred and heritage places, and then food systems. And so in thinking about these large issues that we're doing and all of those issues, we started thinking about what's the best way to not only address issues, bring communities into the work that we're doing, increase the number of Indigenous scientists, but also bringing people that we trust and that we know do this work and have done this work for a really long time. How do we bring this together so that we shift the paradigms, right, of all of these Western-based sciences, right, these disciplines? And CBICS came from that, in thinking about these three areas that you see here on the screen, and doing these local place-based projects in the regional hubs. So there are 8 different hubs across not only here in the United States, but we have our Australian folks. We have folks in Aotearoa, New Zealand, in Hawaii, folks in Canada. And so we understand, right, that Indigenous knowledge is so varied, and it's diverse. And so how do we bring knowledge together and share that knowledge, and understanding that there are so many different ways to approach those 3 issues. And so we brought together folks at a different level who are a part of the thematic working groups. And so we have 8 different groups with co-leaders. And so they are focusing on but learning from the hubs, the work that are happening at the hubs, learning from that and being able to translate that through the knowledge base, and then sharing that with the general public. And so having that available, that knowledge available through curricula, podcasts, story work, plays, all kinds of different medium that we're sort of planning to share the information through. But really that's the heart of civics. I know that's a lot of information there, but it's been at the top of my mind lately. So
and that's just the structure again, which is the regional hubs, and where the Australian hub, thematic working groups, and then the knowledge base. Kel, do you want to talk a bit about training the next generation?
Excuse me. Well, I mean, I think a really critical aspect of training the next generation is in the area of indigenising curriculum, university curriculums, and undergraduate curriculums. And also, I think training the next generation involves coming up with new degree courses. This is one of my areas of interest, which is to come up with a new undergraduate degree course in archaeology for Australia, where students are offered the opportunity to do sort of the conventional Western archaeology degree as an undergraduate, alongside an undergraduate degree that is based on Indigenous knowledge systems, Indigenous epistemologies, ontologies, axiologies, and that the students be given an opportunity to learn about the both ways of knowing and making science knowledge. And that's a form of braiding in itself, that idea. And that would go a long way towards exposing, especially non-Indigenous undergraduate students, to Indigenous ways of knowing and knowledge making. And also it would go a long way to exposing students to some of the really key pillars of what braiding knowledge is about, which was what we've already seen in the presentation this morning, which is things like relationality and relationship building, education, this kind of thing. So that I think that's the future. I think for students, the indigenising of the university curriculums is the future, and taking indigenising curriculum, not just in like out of the university classroom and into like primary school, high school, secondary school. I know that the civics in the US aims to even take training students down to the very lovely kindergarten level, and start children off from a very young age through their schooling years to understand the very important knowledge that their cultures and people bring to the education system. So I think training next generation involves those kinds of aspects, and a lot of exposure. We just need to see a lot more exposure about what Indigenous knowledges look like when they work alongside Western science knowledge. And this is a really important aspect of, the educating of the next generation of scientists, as well as archaeology, anthropology students coming through.
I think one of the things that we got from the workshop was people went in with, so Elspeth and Maria both went in with an idea of what they were going to do for their PhDs, and it changed. I don't know if yours changed at all. Culture might have changed a little bit, but certainly these two, they changed. So Elspeth managed to convince Alison Wiley is now on her panel, and Bonnie Smith is now on Maria's panel. And Maria's doing hers with Kellie in Darwin and with me as a co-supervisor. Elspeth is doing hers here with Kellie as a co-supervisor. And Kolchak has Ali Baker as a co-supervisor, or as your principal supervisor, sorry. Maria, do you want to just say briefly how what your project is now? Because it's quite radical. And at the time, she said, I've got this radical new idea of what I want to do. And she was telling people, and she got great feedback, but it's quite I think this approach will have something different. New things will come out of it.
So one thing that I wasn't expecting from attending the CBIX meeting was to change my entire PhD within a day. So that was a very fun discovery for everybody. But
lucky it's at the start of your
exactly,
PhD.
yeah, very lucky, very lucky. So now my PhD, the idea is that I will create resources alongside community. So things like trading cards, comic books, things that Aura was talking about that I didn't really know was a possibility until I actually attended CBIX and I met everybody that had created these resources with other communities. So the idea is that we'll create these resources for archaeology to make it more accessible for people to come into it. So that was just an experience that going to all the archaeology conferences, it's not very accessible. So I want to create resources for people to understand what's going on and how interesting it is. And then it's also a method of learning directly from community with Indigenous knowledge. So yeah.
That's good. Or this is just, from the website around climate change, because CBIX has 3 areas of focus. One is climate change. Partnering with Indigenous communities is across the whole thing, of course. And there's Aura there on the left and Sonia next to her and Bonnie on the right and John in the middle. There's also food security, and we're not going to go into that one here. But then there's this other one, which we're cultural places, which is really the case study that Elspeth's is working on. Okay, and Wiradjuri was excavated by Giles Ham and Cliff Coulthard, and we're part of that project now. And so Elspeth can talk about the braiding knowledge aspects of that.
Very quickly. Wiradjuri is one site and one project that we're working on in the Australian Hub, one of many projects. It's happening on Adnyamathanha country with the Adnyamathanha community in the Flinders Ranges. And I'll skip through quickly. Obviously, this is a very old site. We have, as Claire said, evidence of occupation back to 49,000 years. And one of the other big findings from Wiradjuri was that we have evidence of Yamachi, or the English term is Diprotodon, extinct megafauna at around 49,000 years, 48,000 years at the same layer, in the same layer as human occupation. So this was obviously a massive archaeological finding, but the really important thing about Wiradjuri is what this means for the Adnyamathanha community. And that's the reason we do archaeology, is because of what the material record means to us and to community. And so what we're doing is we are braiding knowledge throughout the whole project, but we have these knowledge exchange workshops that we're holding annually. And these are sort of our meeting points. And these are opportunities where we come together on Adnyamathanha country. Over 3 days was our first one last year. And it's a chance for us to talk with Adnyamathanha researchers and for Adnyamathanha researchers to talk with the external researchers. We share knowledge both ways. We also had a chance to share knowledge of how to do use wear and residue analysis on some of the lithics from Wiradjuri. So Adnyamathanha researchers did use wear and residue analysis on country, which was amazing. And then Adnyamathanha elders led us as well in learning about how to haft stone tools, how to collect resin. We also learned how to process kangaroo tail sinew. So these workshops are sort of the doing braiding knowledge. This is how we do braiding knowledge throughout the process and how we remain on task, and we have this constant conversation with community. So this is sort of one of the examples of what we're doing.
And the innovation here in the Wiradjuri project is to try and understand deep time, 49,000 years ago, from a braiding knowledge perspective. So really seriously taking Indigenous knowledge as a serious source of a serious way of understanding the archaeological assemblage. And we're back to CBIX. And Kolchak, I don't know if you're in here, but do you want to talk about, this is at the very end, the last day, where we were building a hunting lodge together. Kolchak, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think it was a learning lodge.
Yep.
Sorry,
our learning, teaching lodge, yeah.
Yes, that was an opportunity where we all just got together and were involved in the process of building this particular thing. So it's an exciting thing. Yeah, I just found that the whole process was just really. I found I'm still probably processing it, but it just had an impact on knowing that we're creating something where you can learn in, and it's not just a place, but it actually embodies more of what the culture is and what the spirituality of it all, and also it just inhabits more than just a place of learning. That spiritual aspect, I think, is really probably another.
For me, the best part of being there, we were just in the US for 3 weeks. So we went to the Smithsonian, we went to the SAA conference, and we went to New York to the National Museum of American Indian and Aladdin. And then we went up to Amherst and ended up in Boston. But for me, the best part was the sunrise ceremonies that we had in the mornings there. And I am not a 6 a.m. person, I can tell you. I am not a cold weather person, but it was quite magical in some way. Oh, and there are references. So we did have that other slide about the Australian Hub, but we didn't put in it. So there are references here. So if anyone wants to look at them, they're very welcome, obviously. Oh, well, maybe not. No, yeah, I don't know about that. Okay, so Kellie, do you want to say anything now? Or?
Well, I think just for myself personally, being a Wiradjuri Koori person from Australia, being invited to participate in the building of the teaching lodge was a phenomenally deadly experience, and I'm very grateful that I was able to share that experience with you all, Aura, and your colleagues. And I think it's just a beautiful initiative on the University of Massachusetts campus, which no doubt will come in be a very important, valuable way for yourselves in the civics team to engage with local Indigenous people in the knowledges work that you'll be doing.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, it really was an amazing opportunity. There are very few campuses here in the US that have traditional structures as part of the campus. And so I think there's I think maybe a handful, like 10 different universities that have a traditional home or a teaching space that's on campus available for students to use as well. So, it really is setting precedents, and just the fact that it was something that we all contributed to right from the ground up it's really amazing. So yeah, I'm glad we got some photos to share.
Caroline, I think we're open to questions if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you very much, Claire, Kellie, or everybody. It's been fantastic. And I'd just like to invite our audience now. If you have any questions, we have a Q&A function, so just pop them through and we can ask everybody, all the panelists. But I'd like to start off with one, if that's okay. I just wanted to ask, this is obviously a very big, first of its kind opportunity that is across, different countries and parts of the world. What do you think will be some of the opportunities that come out of this initiative from people working together from different countries? Or I'll ask you first, and then maybe Kel and Claire, if you want to share your thoughts.
I think for us, our hope is that, there are so many Indigenous communities, and we started from the communities that we know and we have, these really deep relationships with. And part of this for us has been reawakening and claiming a lot of the ancestral relationships that we had prior to colonization, right? And so understanding what it took to hold relationships, understanding the reciprocity, the resilience that went into maintaining those relationships. And so for us, it's being able to enact some of our teachings, right? We have Shannon Martin, who led our sunrise ceremony, who spoke about the prophecies from their communities about people, human beings, right? And in my community, we understand as one another as five finger or surface people, so human beings, right? And knowing that it's up to us to come together to use our knowledge, that collective knowledge, to make sure that we survive and that we are able to, again, leave what we found in a better place that for our future generations. And I think as part of CBICS, that's our hope, is to use all of the information that we know is available just within our own communities and really uplift that knowledge so that Indigenous peoples are really at the forefront of being able to have the support to do the things that they need to, right, that are necessary to survive. And so really, I think at a very general level, at least that is our hope, is being able to reconnect and uphold those relationships again and in all of those different ways. So, yeah.
Yeah, look, I think there are so many positives that will come out of this kind of work. And for the discipline, and even for the broader, academies, I think, though, that the work that CBICS is leading out of Turtle Island will have a great impact through its regional hubs around the world in taking the decolonisation journey that we've been on in our discipline even further. And I hope it will take it into the emancipation space. And by that, I mean like the emancipation of Indigenous knowledge systems being recognised for the veracity of what that entails, and bringing that recognition into the discipline and valuing it, and through sharing it with through learning experiences, teaching experiences with students, on country, interconnected, and sort of like between the northern and southern hemisphere, students having opportunities to connect with local communities and other places in the world through student exchanges, this kind of thing. This is all very exciting, positive opportunities that we hope will arise through our relations with our colleagues through the CBICS community. But on the point there of what Aura was saying about reconnecting, in Australia we have a very diverse continent of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander experiences of colonisation history, invasion history, dispossession history, and living under the experience of colonialism. And I think that this kind of research work that we do as we in Australia expand the braiding knowledges and weaving knowledges system of way of doing research work with communities across our continent and do interesting work with different communities, this is really going to be important way for our communities in Australia to revitalise and strengthen what they've always known, but which they haven't always been given an opportunity to express and to show and to teach people in Australia in the areas of climate change, food insecurity and sustainability, and cultural heritage, this kind of thing. So I think that's really the exciting future that we can have in Australia in this space. And then, like I say, sharing opportunities for interchanges, student exchanges, so that we can spread the really important nature of this work around the world.
Caroline?
Claire, do you want to add to that, or are you happy to move on to a question from the audience?
Yeah, no, that was good. I'm happy with, yeah, I agree with both Aura and Kellie.
Okay, I'll take a question from the audience. So in the Q&A, Steve Brown's got a question. He said, thanks for the great presentation. My sense with the braiding approach is that there is a strong sense of equity between Western scientific and Indigenous knowledge. Can you say something about the unequal power relationships in this model, for example, predominantly working in English, and how they're being addressed? Personally, I see archaeology as subservient to Indigenous rights. I'll pass over to you guys, whoever would like to go first.
I know Kellie's got ideas in terms of multiple language people being able to work in their own languages for sure. What do you think? Or do you guys have any thoughts on that? Culture?
I certainly think that we need to shift our thinking away from just one way of looking at it. And I think that we need to approach it not from our known perspective of how we individually think. Being aware of that is probably an important part of that. And I think we're often not aware of how we approach our thinking to knowledges and to everything that we do. And that is really something that I'm quite passionate about is, you know, when you are coming into, you know, other cultures and experiencing other cultures, it's not just a matter of just observing what's going on, but it's actually reevaluating perhaps how you think normally and probably taking on a perspective of where, what is the Indigenous perspective? What is the, how are they approaching it? What angle are they coming in on? And, you know, that is, you know, is a bit of a time thing, I think, as well. So a bit of an immersion. And that's where I think, you know, Indigenous knowledge is coming to the fore and being seen and being heard. The more you hear it, the more you probably have another way of looking at it, or can recognise those differences. But I still think the important thing is that it is getting outside of your own way of thinking.
And Steve, Kolchak, Darren is an artist, and you'd love his work, because what he's done is he's taken the DAATSIA map and he's placed it back. He's done a reverse colonisation and placed that over England, so it's got, you know, all the DAATSIA language groups, but it's colonised back. And he works on Captain Cook's stuff and colonial documents, and he takes the words, then the letters, and he pulls them up digitally, and then he writes what Captain Cook should have written when he was here. So he uses the English language to subvert our norms, and that's quite so that's one way in which you can do it in English. Maria, your work's going to be multilingual, isn't it?
Yeah, so when I was undergoing my honours work, I was
With Dalalbon people?
Yes, so I was by myself on Dalalbon communities, and I was very lucky to have Anita, my cultural supervisor, with me. So everything happened in language, really. I was always in a group of community members speaking Creole, and I've been able to pick up some words. I think that, as Darren was saying, that, you know, being in community, you eventually you learn to adapt and you learn a little bit of the language. And Anita was translating things back to me. But for my PhD work, I will be doing things in language, and then sort of with English subtitles, just to flip those power dynamics as we've been talking about. But yeah, everything that I'll produce will be in language, and we'll be working very closely with community to do that.
And just speaking for CBICS, right, in thinking about it, so I spoke about the 3 levels, right? And at the hub level, the local level, we all have different relationships with communities. So we maintain our relationships and our languages with those groups. So our language at the local level is definitely upheld. Our practices, our protocols are a major part of the work that we're doing. And in that case, right, our Indigenous knowledges are upheld and uplifted and really guide the work that we're doing. So the communities that we're working with are really, they're the ones who are guiding us, and it's their need, their concern, where we're putting the work and the funding behind. And so whatever conversations happen right at that local level are definitely dependent on the group that they're working with. So language is, you know, it's important. It's a critical part of what we're doing, because we can't braid knowledge without using our own languages. So I would, you know, how I'm communicating right now is different than how I would communicate to my own community. And so I would be speaking Navajo language and explaining the work that I do. But it is a way that we translate the information that we're learning at our local community levels out to communities that don't speak Navajo, right? And so if I communicated only in Navajo, it would be maybe myself that understood. And so again, right, we're having to translate up and translate back down again in making sure that we have these different knowledges and languages that are braided in all of these different aspects of what we do too. So, yeah.
And that's a
Thank
great
you, Mara.
question. That's a great question, Steve.
And we had a question from the audience just wanting to know about the role of First Nations languages in braiding knowledge. So, Aura, I think you've just done a really lovely job of answering that. And we've probably got time for one more question in there. The same person has also asked, they've said, thanks so much for this discussion. It's been fascinating. I'm interested in understanding the relationship between two-way science and braided knowledge systems. Is that something that everyone would like to comment on?
Yeah, I think we have talked about it a bit, but I think for me, I like the way that Kochok talks about it, which is that, so you just reiterate or just say that what you say about different braids, they're different things. So you're not actually changing this or changing that, but you're braiding them together to get something new. So say if you've got a food production problem, Indigenous observation over generations and generations and generations. I'm thinking of a case in India with Alina Sumi, who's a Naga anthropologist. When the bees don't come out of their home, it's going to rain. Even though it might be sunny, it's going to rain later in the day. So those very precise, generationally transmitted ecological knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, really, those knowledges can help to give you a better food production, food yield, certainly in the village she works in. And that knowledge could be transported somewhere else to help with food scarcity somewhere else. But those people also have to have the intellectual property protections as well. And one of the things that I like about CBICS is the 8 working groups: data sovereignty, storytelling, field work, protocols and ethics, that support all of our work. So we can call on different working groups, to different thematic groups to help us in our work.
Yeah, and I just think that again, knowledges are all valid. They shouldn't be losing their integrity, the thing that is about them, that is the knowledge itself. And I think a braid really strengthens itself, or can strengthen itself with another braid. And so when you're finding commonalities between braids, between knowledges, you know, you're not devaluing any of them, but you're making it stronger, but you're also making it more seen. So, you know, if we combine all our similar knowledges around certain particular issues from, you know, among many communities, you are making it something that is seen, you are making it something that is stronger, but you are not losing anything about any of their particular knowledges themselves. And I think that's really an important thing, because I think, you know, we don't want to be changing these important parts to our cultures. You know, they're an essence of who we are. They're an essence of our being and the fibre of our core. you know, our connections to the land. For instance, you know, I see a bird, you know, a woolly wagtail sitting on a fence and it flicks its tail up. That has meaning. And in another culture, they will have something similar. And, you know, we don't want to be changing or forgetting or you know, it is still the same. And the braids are really, are all linked together.
Yeah, that's really good. Kellie or Aura, do you have a thought there?
I think we need to move on, do we, Caroline?
Okay.
Yeah, well, I have a very quick question at the end. This is obviously a very big endeavour, and it's been wonderful to hear all about it today. How can people follow along with all the updates coming out of CBIX? Is there going to be a central website or social media just for people in the audience who want to continue to follow along? And perhaps, Aura, as co-principal investigator, I might ask you that question.
Yeah, so we still maintain the website through the UMass Amherst. They're the server there. And so we're building it out right now. We have folks who are working on it. And so we are also trying to work on social media. And so I would just say, check out the website that we have at UMass Amherst. And so we'll be building things out soon. So.
Great, thank you. And Kel and Claire, do you have anything that you're establishing on social media in Australia, or is it a bit of a watch and see?
I think at this stage we are watching and seeing, because we're aware we're part of a much bigger consortium, and we're certainly happy to talk to people who, you know, who are interested in this. But we also don't want to mess with any protocols that CBIX might have as a whole. So we're trying to be respectful of so being led in this sense, rather than just going off on our own little jaunty ride. So
I would add that in addition to the CBIX website, which is an excellent website for anybody to Google and have a look at and read through the various initiatives and areas that Aura and her colleagues are involved in. It's all deadly stuff. Claire and I are working within Australia in different community contexts, and we're going to be putting out a website in the near future, and putting some interesting stories and resources on the website about the sort of weaving knowledges that we're doing here with the people that we're working with in Australia. So watch that space too.
And we do have a site for Wiradjuri, don't we?
Soon.
We should. Soon. Oh, we haven't launched it yet.
Coming.
Yes. So as Kellie said, we'll work on that, but we want to make sure that it's fitting in with what CBIX as a whole thinks is appropriate.
Well, thank you. I can't wait to see everything come out. It's been great to hear all about the project today and all the different facets of it, and across the seas and across countries and different people. It's very exciting, very wonderful initiative. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to say thank you very much to our panellists, Aura, who's joining us from North America. So thank you very much. I know it's late in the evening there. Kel, Claire, Darren, Elspeth, Maria, and everybody involved in the broader project. Thank you very much, and thank you also to our attendees for joining us.
Thank you,
and we'll wrap up at that.